In just 21 seconds, one of the biggest music legends in the world went from sitting calmly on the couch to storming off the set in a rage that left the entire studio in complete shock. A fierce battle of words, accusations flying back and forth, and a moment so explosive that security had to step in. This is the story of how Cher got kicked off The View after a fiery showdown with Joy Behar that nobody saw coming. Last night's episode started like any other. The lights were bright, the audience was excited, and Cher walked onto the stage looking absolutely stunning in a black leather jacket, and her signature long dark hair flowing behind her. The crowd went wild. People were clapping and cheering because, let's be honest, it's Cher. She's a living legend. She sat down on that famous couch, gave everyone a big smile, and waved to the audience. Everything seemed perfect. Everything seemed normal. But what was about to happen would go down as one of the most intense moments in the show's history. Joy Behar started off with some friendly questions. She asked Cher about her latest projects, her music, and how she was doing. Cher answered politely, talking about her new album and some charity work she'd been doing. The audience loved it. They laughed at her jokes and clapped when she talked about helping people. For the first few minutes, everything was going smoothly. But then, Joy decided to change the subject. And that's when things started to get tense. Joy leaned forward with this look on her face, like she was about to ask something she'd been dying to say. She brought up politics. Now, anyone who knows Cher knows that she's never been shy about sharing her political opinions. She's very vocal on social media and has always stood up for what she believes in. Joy knew this, and instead of just having a friendly conversation about it, Joy started pushing buttons. "So Cher," Joy said with a smirk, "you've been pretty loud on social media lately about your political views. Some people are saying you should just stick to singing and stay out of politics. What do you say to that?" The audience got quiet. You could feel the tension in the room instantly. Cher's smile faded a little bit, and she sat up straighter in her seat. She looked directly at Joy and said, "Well, Joy, I think people have the right to speak their minds. I've been around for a long time, and I've earned the right to say what I think, just like you do on this show every single day." That was a fair response. Cher wasn't being mean. She was just standing up for herself. But Joy didn't like that answer. Instead of moving on to something else, she kept going. She started talking about some of Cher's tweets, reading them out loud to the audience and making fun of them. She was laughing, but it wasn't a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made it seem like she thought Cher was being ridiculous. Cher wasn't laughing. She crossed her arms and stared at Joy. "Are you seriously going to sit here and mock me for caring about things?" Cher asked. Her voice was calm, but you could tell she was getting annoyed. "I use my platform to speak up for people who don't have a voice. What's wrong with that?" Joy waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, come on, Cher. Half the time you're just stirring up drama online. You know that, right? Some of your takes are just out there." The audience gasped. "You don't talk to Cher like that." But Joy just kept going. She started bringing up specific tweets and posts, twisting Cher's words to make them sound extreme or silly. Cher tried to explain what she actually meant, but Joy kept interrupting her. Every time Cher started to talk, Joy would cut her off with another comment or joke. The other hosts on the panel looked uncomfortable. They were glancing at each other, not sure what to do. This wasn't a normal interview anymore. This was turning into something else. Cher's face was getting red. You could see her jaw clenching. She was trying so hard to stay calm and professional, but Joy wasn't letting up. Finally, Cher said, "You know what, Joy? I came here to talk about my music and my work, not to be lectured by you about how I should live my life." Joy laughed again, that same condescending laugh. "I'm not lecturing you, Cher. I'm just saying that maybe you should think before you post. Some of the stuff you say is pretty out there." "Out there?" Cher repeated, her voice getting louder. "Out there? Joy, I've been fighting for people's rights for decades. I've been standing up for what's right when it wasn't popular. Where were you?" The audience erupted with a mix of gasps and scattered applause. Some people were shocked that Cher was firing back. Others were clearly on her side. Joy's face changed. She wasn't smiling anymore. Now she looked angry too. "Excuse me?" Joy said, sitting up straight. "Where was I? I've been doing this show for years, talking about important issues every single day. Don't come on here and act like you're the only one who cares about things. That's not what I said, Cher shot back. But you're sitting here attacking me for using my voice. That's rich coming from someone who talks over people every single day on this show. Oh, it was getting heated now. The energy in the studio was electric. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay silent. The other hosts were frozen in their seats, watching this unfold like they were witnessing a car crash. Nobody knew what to do. Joy's face was turning red now, too. She was clearly not used to someone challenging her like this on her own show. I don't talk over people, Joy said defensively. I facilitate conversation. Cher actually laughed at that. Facilitate? Joy, you bulldoze over everyone. I've been trying to answer your questions, but you keep cutting me off to make your little jokes. Joy pointed her finger at Cher. Hey, I invited you onto this show. If you don't like how I run things, there's the door. The audience gasped even louder this time. Did Joy Behar really just tell Cher she could leave? The disrespect was unbelievable. Cher's eyes went wide, and for a second, she just stared at Joy in complete shock. Then her expression changed to anger. Pure anger. Are you seriously telling me to leave? Cher asked, her voice low and dangerous. You invited me here, you attacked me on air, and now you're telling me to get out? I'm just saying, Joy said, trying to backtrack a little but still sounding defensive. If you can't handle a little back and forth, maybe you're too sensitive. That was it. That was the moment everything exploded. Cher stood up from the couch, and the entire studio went silent. You could hear a pin drop. She looked down at Joy with fire in her eyes and said, Too sensitive? You think I'm being too sensitive? Joy, you've been disrespecting me since I sat down. You mocked my beliefs. You twisted my words. And now you're calling me sensitive? Joy stood up too, facing Cher. I'm just doing my job, Cher. If you can't take it, that's on you. Your job? Cher's voice was getting louder now. Your job is to bully your guests? Your job is to make people feel small so you can feel big? That's what you do, Joy. You tear people down. The other hosts finally tried to jump in. One of them said, Okay, let's all just take a breath and calm down. But neither Cher nor Joy was listening. They were locked in on each other, both furious. Joy crossed her arms. I don't tear people down. I ask tough questions. That's what journalists do. Cher laughed. But it was a bitter laugh. Journalist? You're not a journalist, Joy. You're a bully with a microphone. There's a difference. The audience was losing their minds. Some people were cheering for Cher. Others looked shocked. The camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. This was complete chaos. Joy's face was bright red now, and she was practically shaking with anger. How dare you, Joy said, her voice shaking. How dare you come on my show and insult me like this? Your show? Cher said, throwing her hands up. This isn't your show, Joy. This is The View. There are other people here. But you act like you own the place, and everyone else is just here to agree with you. Joy stepped closer to Cher, and for a moment, it looked like things might get physical. The other hosts jumped up and got between them. The audience was on their feet now. Some people yelling, some people trying to see what was happening. Security guards started moving toward the stage. You need to leave, Joy said, pointing toward the exit. Get off my set. Cher stared at her for a long moment. Then she said, Gladly. I don't want to be around someone who treats people like garbage anyway. She turned to walk away, but then she stopped and turned back around. You know what the sad part is, Joy? You had a chance to have a real conversation with me. We could have talked about things that matter. But instead, you chose to be petty and mean. That says everything about you. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Cher didn't give her the chance. She held up her hand and said, I'm done. I'm not going to waste another second of my time on you. And with that, Cher walked off the stage. The audience was going absolutely wild. Some people were cheering for her. Others were booing Joy. The other hosts looked completely stunned, like they couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. Joy stood there, her face red, her arms crossed, trying to look unbothered but clearly shaken. As Cher walked backstage, you could hear her saying to someone off camera, I can't believe I just wasted my time with that. Her voice was still full of anger. The cameras tried to follow her, but she disappeared behind the curtain. Meanwhile, back on stage, Joy tried to regain control of the show. "Well," Joy said, trying to sound casual, but her voice was shaking. "I guess she couldn't handle a real conversation." But the audience wasn't having it. People started booing even louder. One of the other hosts tried to smooth things over by saying, "Let's take a commercial break." But the damage was done. The show cut to commercial, but everyone watching at home and everyone in that studio knew exactly what had just happened. Joy Behar had pushed one of the biggest stars in the world too far, and Cher had stood up for herself in a way that nobody would ever forget. Backstage, crew members said they could hear Cher talking to her team, still fired up. "I'm not going to sit there and let her disrespect me like that," she said. "I don't care who she is. Nobody talks to me that way." Her team was trying to calm her down, but Cher was having none of it. She grabbed her things and headed straight for the exit. Meanwhile, during the commercial break, Joy was talking to the producers. People nearby said she was defending herself, saying that Cher was being too sensitive and that she was just doing her job as a host. But the other hosts weren't really agreeing with her. One of them apparently said, "Joy, that was too far. You really went after her." But Joy wasn't backing down. She insisted that she hadn't done anything wrong. When the show came back from commercial, Joy tried to continue like nothing had happened. She moved on to the next topic, talking about some other news story. But everyone could tell she was rattled. Her voice wasn't as confident as usual. She kept stumbling over her words. The other hosts were quieter than normal, and the audience energy had completely changed. What should have been a fun, exciting episode with a legendary guest had turned into a disaster. Social media exploded within minutes. People who were watching live started posting about what they'd just seen. Clips of the argument started getting shared everywhere. Some people were on Cher's side, saying that Joy had been disrespectful and deserved to be called out. Others defended Joy, saying she was just doing her job and that Cher overreacted. But the majority of people seemed to agree on one thing. This was one of the most explosive moments in talk show history. The confrontation between Cher and Joy Behar became the only thing people could talk about. It wasn't just a disagreement, it was a full-blown battle that showed what happens when two strong personalities clash and neither one is willing to back down. Cher stood her ground, refused to be disrespected, and walked away with her head held high. And Joy was left standing on that stage, trying to defend actions that a lot of people thought were indefensible. What made this fight so intense was that both women genuinely believed they were in the right. Joy thought she was asking tough questions and pushing back against someone who puts everything on social media. Cher thought she was defending her right to speak her mind and calling out someone who was being a bully. Neither one was going to apologize. Neither one was going to admit they were wrong, and that made the confrontation even more explosive. The argument touched on something bigger too. It was about respect. It was about whether hosts have the right to attack their guests, or whether they should treat them with basic decency. It was about whether celebrities should be allowed to have political opinions, or whether they should stay in their lane. These are questions that people argue about all the time, and seeing them play out in real time, with two famous women going head-to-head, made it impossible to look away. By the time Cher reached her car outside the studio, paparazzi were already there, shoving cameras in her face and yelling questions. "Cher, what happened in there? Are you okay?" She didn't stop to answer. She just got in her car, and her team drove away. But even through the car window, you could see the frustration on her face. This was supposed to be a simple talk show appearance. Instead, it turned into one of the most dramatic moments of her entire career. Back inside the studio, the rest of the show continued, but everyone knew it was pointless. Nobody was paying attention to the other segments. All anyone could think about was the fight. When the show finally ended, Joy left the set quickly, not stopping to talk to anyone. The other hosts stayed behind, discussing what had happened with producers and trying to figure out what went wrong. In the days that followed, people couldn't stop talking about it. News outlets covered the story. Entertainment shows replayed the clips over and over. Everyone had an opinion. Some people called it the best television they'd seen in years. Others said it was a disaster that should never have happened. But everyone agreed that it was real, raw, and absolutely unforgettable. What made this confrontation different from other talk show arguments was how personal it got. This wasn't just a disagreement about facts or opinions. This was two women attacking each other's character. Joy called Cher too sensitive and said she couldn't handle tough questions. Cher called Joy a bully and said she tears people down for fun. These weren't things you could take back. These were real feelings that had been building up during the interview until they finally exploded. And the way it ended, with Cher walking off and Joy telling her to leave, made it even more dramatic. There was no resolution. There was no moment where they shook hands and agreed to disagree. It was pure conflict from start to finish, ending with Cher storming out and Joy standing there, trying to pretend she wasn't bothered but clearly shaken by what had just happened. People watching at home said they could feel the tension through their screens. It wasn't like watching actors perform a scene. This was real anger, real frustration, and real emotion. You could see it in Cher's eyes when she stood up. You could hear it in her voice when she called Joy a bully. And you could see it in Joy's face when she realized she'd pushed too far, but was too stubborn to admit it. The whole thing lasted less than 10 minutes, but it felt like forever. Every second was packed with tension. Every word hit like a punch. And when Cher finally walked off that stage, it felt like the end of something. Not just the end of an interview, but the end of any possibility that these two women would ever be able to have a normal conversation again. Looking back at the interview, you can pinpoint the exact moment when things went wrong. It was when Joy decided to mock Cher's social media posts instead of having a respectful conversation about them. That's when Cher's demeanor changed. That's when the friendly celebrity chat turned into a battle. And once that line was crossed, there was no going back. What's interesting is that both women are known for being strong and outspoken. They both have decades of experience in the entertainment industry. They both have loyal fans who support them no matter what. So when they clashed, it wasn't a one-sided fight. It was an even match between two powerful women who refused to be pushed around. And that's what made it so compelling to watch. The argument also revealed something about the nature of talk shows. Hosts often walk a fine line between asking tough questions and being disrespectful. In this case, Joy crossed that line, and Cher called her out on it. It made people wonder, how many other guests have felt disrespected on talk shows but didn't say anything? How many times has this kind of thing happened behind the scenes? This time, it all played out on live television for everyone to see. As the confrontation reached its peak, with both women on their feet and security moving in, you could see the panic on the faces of the crew. This wasn't in the script. This wasn't supposed to happen, but it was happening, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the chaos. When Cher said, "Nobody talks to me that way," it was more than just a statement. It was a declaration. She was drawing a line and saying that she wouldn't tolerate disrespect, no matter who it came from or where it happened. And the audience responded to that. They cheered, because they saw someone standing up for themselves in a moment when it would have been easier to just sit down and take it. Joy's response, telling Cher to leave if she didn't like it, was the final straw. It showed that she wasn't interested in apologizing or de-escalating the situation. She was doubling down, insisting that she'd done nothing wrong, and that made the conflict irreversible. There was no path back to a normal conversation after that. The only option left was for someone to leave, and that someone was Cher. As Cher walked off the stage for the last time, her footsteps echoing in the now quiet studio, it marked the end of one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history. The interview that was supposed to celebrate a legendary career instead became a battleground where two powerful women refused to back down. And everyone who watched it knew they'd just witnessed something they would never forget.